Hi, my name is Alireza Karduni, and today I will be presenting to you our paper titled Correcting Misperceptions at a Glance, Using Data Visualizations to Reduce Political Sectarianism. This work is done by my dear co-authors, Douglas Marquand, Shubham Shah, Milad Rogha, Mai Tai, and Wenwen Du. This is a caricature of me. So this is Alireza, bald. This is still me. Not only bald, I consider myself a lefty radical Antifa as well. So all the other lefty Antifas are my in-party, and all the people who are more conservative than me are my out-party. If you ask me what proportion of right-wingers, the out-party, who support political violence, I probably overestimate that number. So this is the phenomenon that people perceive views of other groups to be more extreme and less diverse than they actually are. This is what is called false polarization. So can we correct these misperceptions? Assume that we ask a Democrat about Republicans. So we ask the Democrat to predict out-party views, for example, by asking them what proportion of Republicans support political violence. And then we show them the actual level of support because we've collected the data, and then we can tell that person, you predicted that 80% of Republicans support political violence, but the number is actually 40%. So we show the gap in the perception of the out party, and then this is what we can call correcting misperceptions. And this can be done, obviously, for Republicans toward Democrats as well. A lot of studies have studied this process, and then they found that doing this sort of correction reduces the perception gap about the out party, and also reduces respondents' own expressed extremism. However, this second effect, it's not as strong. Some studies fail to show this effect. These correction effects can be easily undermined, for example, by a caveat that there is uncertainty in the data. Another limitation is that previous studies focus exclusively on the average or most common view of the out party. So this focus on central tendency might obscure important details. It might contradict with personal experiences with more extreme views, leading to mistrust. So in this study, we ask, how does communicating variability in out-party views using data visualizations impact the correction of partisan misperceptions? So to do this, we ask people to predict out-party views. We show them visualizations comparing their views with actual responses. Then we ask them how much they support those views themselves. We had several different visualization types. This was the condition where people saw the average response from the out party. This was the control condition where the perceptions were not corrected. This was a mean plus interval condition where participants saw a representation of uncertainty, a range where 75% of responses were within that region. And this is the mean plus points where the participant can see all the individual responses from the out party as well. So given these conditions, we had a between subject study with 120 participants per condition, where participants first predicted the level of out party support for 10 different items for support for political violence and support for undemocratic practices. And then they went through the visualization conditions and then reported their own level of support for all 10 actions. And in the post-test, we had some data and visualization perceptions, recall tasks, and reflections, qualitative reflections on participants' own responses. A couple of hypotheses. The first was that basically to replicate the results from previous studies, that the mean-only condition will show lower self-reported support for political violence and undemocratic processes compared to control. And the other is that because of the lack of inclusion of uncertainty, mean-only will also show lower support for political violence on democratic processes in comparison to the mean plus interval and the mean plus 2 points conditions. Interestingly, we are able to replicate the previous results where the participants who are in the mean-only condition who saw a comparison to the out-party views showed smaller support for both actions, both political violence and undemocratic processes. The effect was still there, but smaller for mean plus interval in comparison to control. And then the mean plus point had a stronger effect. And then mean plus point also in general, compared to all the other conditions, showed a lower support. So our second hypothesis that mean 2 is not supported fully because these mean plus points condition is showing some interesting results, and we can explore and speculate why. So to sum up, correction conditions less likely to show support for political violence and undemocratic processes. Mean plus points and mean only show a larger effect. Mean plus point plus interval not as much. And then for the mean plus interval, we also see that for this condition, we also see that participants show higher error in remembering the proportion of support and in general estimating average response after seeing the data. So we speculate that maybe because the inclusion of this uncertainty range, many of participants might see their response falling within the range, reducing that surprise effect by saying, oh, look, I guess my guess is in the ballpark of what everyone is. Yeah. And then to look at these conditions again, we can see that this effects exist with all of these conditions. However, for the mean plus points, we have another interesting speculation that because participants were able to see these densities of close to no support points, they were more surprised. The weight of seeing a lot of non-support might have led to higher surprise effects. So we also did some qualitative analysis because participants, after going through the study conditions, retrospectively reflected on their own responses. But we don't have time to talk about it. So in general, a lot of people realized their own biases. Some people showed some tendency to change, but a lot of people were also just angry and suspicious of the data. It's pretty cool. Please read the paper. So looking back at these visualizations, it's important to notice that this was just by this sort of effect is by just showing participants some data of other people, right? Just showing that there is a misperception present. And there are differences between conditions. Obviously, there are all these other ways of representing this data that we could test. However, I think there's, to some extent, there's some good news here that we could be a little bit happy about. There is some hope. In general, what do we think about these correction effects? So when people are enraged, attitude change is more difficult. And this is a hard thing that we deal with. We are living in a emotionally charged society, incentivized by social media and ad revenues of all these media agencies, right? We also saw that participants who were more hopeful showed more receptivity to attitude change. So maybe by focusing on hope, we might see interesting things happen. The election last night in New York might show some resemblance of this. Even though correction effects were relatively small and similar magnitude with previous studies, it is important to note that we didn't really try to persuade people. This sort of false polarization effect is impactful when it links with personal elaboration, with when people actually think about a problem, predict something, and then you come back and show them the differences. This sort of elaborative processing might be a really strong way of communicating information, and just maybe communicating this sort of existence of false polarization might be a good way to combat political sectarianism. Lastly, political climate matters. We're in a tough times right now. Other knowledge impacts participants' judgments, personal experiences. So we shouldn't really try to undermine that, only focus on the data, only focus on what people are wrong. And we might have ways of augmenting visualizations to better reflect individual experiences. I missed Vienna because there wasn't any visa appointments. Sorry, I missed most of my friends. If you have any questions, I'll probably be on Discord and happy to respond.